The sky over the moon of Threll Car tore open with fire. A small human scout ship, the Wandering Star, spun out of control as smoke poured from its broken engine. Inside, Lieutenant Mara Voss gripped the controls with both hands, her knuckles white, her breath sharp and fast. Alarms screamed around her. The ship had been hit by debris from an old orbital battle, and now it was falling toward a world she had never seen on any map. Mara was not a soldier. She was a survey officer, sent to check old signal readings from a quiet corner of space. No one expected trouble. No one expected war. But the moon below her belonged to a small, gentle species called the Threll, and above their world, the shadow of a much larger power was spreading like a stain. The Kryvax Dominion had come to take what was not theirs. The ship hit the ground hard. Trees snapped. Metal screamed against rock. Then everything went dark. When Mara opened her eyes again, pain filled her body. Her leg was bent the wrong way. Blood ran down the side of her face. The cockpit was crushed around her, and smoke curled through the cracks in the hull. She tried to move, but her body would not listen. She was going to die here, alone, on a world with no name that she knew. Then she heard voices. They were not human voices. They were soft, clicking sounds, mixed with low, musical tones, like wind moving through hollow reeds. Shapes moved outside the broken window of the ship. Tall, thin figures with long limbs and large, dark eyes that caught the moonlight. Their skin was pale gray, almost blue, and their fingers were long and delicate, made for careful work rather than fighting. These were the Threll, and they had never seen a human before. The tallest of them, an elder named Thassa, stepped closer to the wreck. She could have turned away. She could have run and told her people to stay far from the strange metal ship that had fallen from the sky. The Dominion had taught her people to fear anything new, anything unknown, because unknown things often brought soldiers in chains. But when Thassa looked through the broken glass and saw the small, fragile creature inside, bleeding, trapped, and helpless, something old and quiet stirred inside her. It was not fear. It was pity, and beneath the pity, something like duty. "She is dying," Thassa said to the others gathered behind her. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to decide. "We cannot leave her." One of the younger hunters, a Threll named Voss, no, his name was Wren, argued that helping the stranger was too dangerous. Dominion patrols were everywhere. If they were caught helping an outsider, an alien from beyond the stars, the punishment would fall not just on them, but on the whole clan. Villages had been burned for smaller crimes. Families had vanished into Dominion labor camps for simply standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Thassa did not move. She looked at Wren with old, patient eyes. "If we let fear decide everything we do," she said, "then the Dominion has already won, even without lifting a weapon against us. We are still free enough to choose kindness. Let us not throw that away." Slowly, carefully, the Threll pulled Mara from the wreckage. They were gentle with her, more gentle than she expected from creatures she did not understand. They carried her deep into the forest, away from the crash site, using branches and leaves to hide the path behind them, so that Dominion scouts would not easily follow. It took most of the night to reach their hidden village, a cluster of homes built into the roots of enormous, ancient trees, safe from the eyes of Dominion satellites above. Mara drifted in and out of consciousness during the journey. She remembered flashes, the smell of strange plants, the soft clicking language of her rescuers, the careful way they held her broken leg so it would not move. She remembered thinking, in her half-conscious state, that she should be afraid. She had crashed on an alien world, surrounded by alien beings she knew nothing about, and yet, somehow, she was not afraid. There was something in the way they carried her, slow, careful, unhurried, that told her she was safe. When she finally woke fully, she was lying on a soft bed of woven grass inside a warm, dim room. Her leg had been set and wrapped in some kind of plant fiber bandage. The pain was still there, but it was dull now, manageable. An old Threll sat beside her, watching her with quiet, patient eyes. This was Thassa. Neither of them understood the other's words at first. Mara tried speaking slowly, using simple words and gestures. Thassa listened, tilting her head the way a curious bird might, and answered in her own clicking tongue, gesturing back. It took days of patient effort before basic understanding began to form between them. Simple words like water, food, pain, thank you. During this time, Mara learned, piece by piece, about the world she had fallen into. The Threll were not a warrior people. They were farmers, artists, and quiet thinkers, spread across scattered villages that stretched along the fertile valleys of their moon. They had no great armies, no powerful weapons, no allies among the stars. When the Kryvax Dominion arrived 3 years earlier, the Threll had no way to fight back. Entire villages were taken as slave labor. Others fled into the deep forests, like Thassa's clan, hoping to be forgotten. And yet, in the middle of their own suffering, they had chosen to save her. Mara did not understand why, not fully, not yet. She was a stranger, a burden, a danger to everyone who helped her. If Dominion patrols found her here, they would not simply take her. They would punish the entire village for hiding an alien from beyond their world. The Threll had nothing to gain by helping her. They had only risk, only danger, only the threat of losing everything they had left. But Thassa had made her choice, and the rest of the clan, reluctantly at first, followed her lead. Food was shared with the stranger, even when food was scarce. Medicine made from rare forest plants was used to fight the infection spreading through her wounded leg. Guards were posted at night, not to watch the stranger, but to watch for Dominion patrols that might stumble too close to the village. Slowly, over the following days, Mara's fever broke. Her leg began to heal, though slowly and unevenly, since Threll medicine was not made for human bodies. She grew stronger, and with strength came clearer thought. She began to understand the shape of the danger she was in, and the far greater danger she had brought upon the people who saved her. One evening, sitting outside Thassa's home and watching the twin moons rise over the treetops, Mara asked, through broken words and gestures, why? Why help her? Why risk so much for one stranger who could not even speak their language, who came from a world none of them had ever heard of? Thassa was quiet for a long moment. Then she answered, slowly, so that Mara could understand each simple word. Because you were dying, Thassa said, and no one deserves to die alone, forgotten, simply because they came from somewhere far away. We have lost so much to people who believe strength gives them the right to ignore kindness. We will not become like them. Not even now. Not even for you, stranger who fell from the sky. Mara did not have words for what she felt in that moment. Gratitude was too small a word. She looked around the quiet village, at the tired but determined faces of the people who had saved her life, without knowing anything about her. Not her name, not her people, not what she could offer in return. They had simply seen someone in need, and answered that need with everything they had left to give. Far above them, unseen in the dark sky, Dominion patrol ships moved slowly across the stars, searching for any sign of the missing human vessel. The search was growing wider, more careful, more thorough. It was only a matter of time before they came close enough to threaten the hidden village and the secret it now protected. But for tonight, under the twin moons, Mara Voss was alive, and she was not alone. And somewhere deep inside her, a quiet promise began to form, that if she ever found a way to call for help, she would not leave without repaying the debt these strangers had given her, whatever the cost. The forest was silent except for the wind. Somewhere far away, engines hummed through the dark, searching, waiting, coming closer with each passing night. In the days that followed, Mara began to notice small things about the village that told her more about the Threll than words ever could. Children ran between the great tree roots, laughing quietly, careful even in their play not to make too much noise. Old carvings covered the walls of many homes, telling stories of a time before the Dominion came, when the Threll had lived in open cities under bright skies, without fear of patrol ships passing overhead. Those cities were gone now, burned or abandoned, and the survivors had learned to live small, quiet lives in the shadows of their own world. Ren, the young hunter who had first argued against helping her, slowly began to soften. He still did not trust her fully, and he watched her with careful eyes whenever she moved through the village. But he also began teaching her small things, how to walk without snapping dry branches underfoot, how to recognize the plants that could be eaten and the ones that could kill. It was clumsy, wordless teaching at first, full of gestures and patient repetition, but it built a strange kind of understanding between them, stronger than words might have made it. Mara, in turn, tried to explain her own world to them, drawing rough pictures in the dirt with a stick. Ships, cities, oceans, a species called humanity that had once fought wars among themselves before learning, slowly and painfully, to stand together. She did not know if the Threll understood everything she tried to show them, but they listened, and that was enough for now. Each night, Thassa would sit beside her, watching the sky, saying little. Mara began to realize that the old Threll elder carried a heavy weight on her shoulders. The survival of her people rested on choices made every single day. Choices about food, about safety, about how far kindness could stretch before it broke the whole village apart. Helping Mara was only the latest, and perhaps the heaviest, of those choices. One night, Thassa spoke without being asked. "There were more of us once," she said quietly, her clicking voice slower than usual. "Before the ships came, before the fires, we were not warriors, but we were many, and we were free. Now we are few, and we are hidden. But hidden does not mean broken. Remember that, stranger. Even the smallest flame can survive the longest winter, if it is protected." Mara did not fully understand every word, but she understood the feeling behind them, the quiet, stubborn hope of a people who refused to disappear completely, no matter what the galaxy took from them. She thought of her own people, far away across the stars, unaware that she was even alive, unaware of the debt now growing between her and the gentle, gray-skinned beings who had chosen to save a stranger instead of turning away. Somewhere far above the forest canopy, unseen in the dark, the search for the missing human ship continued. The Dominion garrison stationed on the far side of the moon had detected the crash days earlier, and though the wreckage had told them little, patrol routes were slowly widening, sweeping closer to the hidden valleys where villages like Thassa's tried to remain unseen. Time, Mara realized, was running out, not just for her, but for everyone who had chosen to protect her. 2 weeks passed since the crash, and Mara Voss could now walk on her healing leg, though slowly, and with a wooden stick Ren had carved for her. Her understanding of the Threll language had grown as well. She could speak simple sentences now, enough to ask questions, enough to thank people properly, enough to begin truly listening to the stories of the people who had saved her. What she learned filled her with a quiet, growing anger. The Kryvax Dominion had arrived at Threlkar 3 years earlier, claiming the moon for its rich mineral deposits hidden deep beneath the forest floor. The Threll had no army capable of stopping them, no fleet to challenge the Dominion warships that appeared in their skies. Within months, entire cities had been emptied. Some Threll were taken to work in Dominion mines, laboring under harsh conditions until their bodies gave out. Others were simply killed, treated as obstacles to be cleared, rather than a people to be respected. The rest, like Thassa's clan, fled into hiding, scattered across the deep forests and hidden valleys of their own world. No one had come to help them. The Threll were not powerful enough, not resource-rich enough, not connected enough to matter to the larger powers of the galaxy. Their suffering had gone unnoticed, unrecorded, forgotten by everyone except themselves. Sitting by the fire one evening, Mara asked Thassa why the clan continued to resist, continued to survive, when it would be so much easier to simply give up, to accept whatever the Dominion offered in exchange for peace. Thassa's answer was simple, and it stayed with Mara for a long time afterward. "Giving up is not peace," Thassa said. "It is only a slower kind of dying. We would rather live small and hidden, but free in our hearts, than live large and comfortable, but owned by someone else's will." That same night, a scout returned to the village with troubling news. A Dominion patrol had been spotted only half a day's walk from the hidden valley, moving slowly, methodically, searching the forest floor as though looking for something specific. Mara's stomach turned cold. She knew, without being told, that the patrol was searching for her. The wreckage of her ship had likely been found, and the Dominion would not simply ignore an unknown alien vessel crashing on territory they controlled. The village council gathered that night inside the largest of the tree root homes. Elders, hunters, and parents crowded together, speaking in low, urgent voices. Mara sat at the edge of the gathering, feeling every eye occasionally turn toward her, feeling the weight of the danger she represented. She almost offered to leave, to walk out into the forest alone and draw the patrol away from the village, even if it meant capture, or worse. But before she could speak the words, Thassa raised a hand for silence. "She stays," Thassa said firmly. We did not save her life, only to throw it away now, out of fear. We will move the village deeper into the forest, and we will hide our tracks. This is not the first time we have had to disappear. It will not be the last. Ren, standing near the back of the gathering, spoke up. His voice was steady now, no longer filled with the doubt Mara had heard from him weeks earlier. I will lead a small group to watch the patrol's movements, he said. If they come too close, we will need warning before they reach the new camp. Mara watched this exchange with growing understanding. These were not soldiers. They had no weapons beyond simple hunting tools, no armor, no training for war, and yet they organized themselves with quiet determination, protecting not just their own families, but a stranger from beyond the stars, who had brought danger crashing down into their lives. She thought of her own people, safe and unaware, light years away, and felt a fierce need to survive, not just for herself, but to one day repay what was being given to her now. Over the following days, the village began the slow, careful work of moving. Homes built from woven branches and packed earth were dismantled quietly, their materials carried deeper into the forest to be rebuilt elsewhere. Food stores were divided and hidden in multiple locations, so that losing one cache would not mean starvation. Children were taught, quickly and firmly, how to move without sound, how to freeze completely still if a patrol ship passed overhead. Mara helped where she could, though her injured leg limited how much weight she could carry. She spent much of her time instead working on something else, an idea that had been forming in the back of her mind since the night she first woke in Thassa's home. If she could find enough working parts from her crashed ship, she might be able to build a distress beacon, something powerful enough to reach beyond the moon's atmosphere, beyond Dominion jamming fields, out into open space where a passing Terran ship might detect it. It was a dangerous idea. Any signal strong enough to reach deep space would also be strong enough for Dominion sensors to detect and trace back to its source. If she built the beacon and used it, she would be pointing a finger directly at the village that had saved her life. She hesitated for days before finally bringing the idea to Thassa. She expected refusal, perhaps even anger, at the suggestion of bringing more danger to the clan. Instead, Thassa listened carefully, asking careful questions about how the beacon would work, how long it would need to transmit, how likely it was that Mara's people would actually hear the call and respond. If my people receive the signal, Mara explained honestly, they will come. But it may take time, days, maybe weeks, for a ship to arrive. And when they see the signal's origin, the Dominion patrols may become far more aggressive, searching this entire region without mercy. Thassa was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Then she spoke, her voice calm but certain. We are already hunted, stranger. We are already hiding, already losing pieces of ourselves each season the Dominion remains here. If there is even a small chance that your people can help us, not just you, but all of us, then it is worth the risk. An honorless people do not deserve to win, even against a single accidental guest who fell from their sky. Let us try. Mara felt something tighten in her chest, something between fear and fierce gratitude. These people, who had lost so much already, were willing to risk what little they had left, not just for her, but for the small, uncertain hope that her call for help might somehow benefit them all too. That night, with the help of several curious young Threll who had grown fascinated by the strange metal pieces from her wrecked ship, Mara began sorting through the salvaged wreckage they had carefully carried into the forest weeks earlier. Broken panels, damaged wiring, a cracked but partially functional communications array. It was not much, but it might be enough. She began to plan, sketching designs in the dirt, explaining pieces and functions using the simple words she now shared with her new companions. Above them, the sky remained quiet for now, the twin moons rising slowly over the treetops. But everyone in the village knew, without needing to say it aloud, that quiet moments like this one were growing rare and would not last much longer. The new camp, deeper in the forest, was harder to reach and harder to see from above. Thick branches formed a natural roof overhead, blocking most sensor sweeps from Dominion patrol craft. Still, Mara noticed the toll the move had taken on the clan. Elders who struggled to walk long distances were carried on woven stretchers. Food stores, already thin, grew thinner from the effort of relocating everything by hand. Children who had once played freely near the old camp now stayed close to their parents, quiet and watchful, sensing the tension in the adults around them even without fully understanding it. Ren returned from his scouting mission 3 days later, exhausted but with useful information. The Dominion patrol had passed close to the old camp, close enough to find some of the abandoned structures, but had not discovered any sign of where the village had moved. Still, Ren warned that the patrol had left markers behind, small devices planted in the ground that likely recorded movement or sound. The Dominion was not simply searching randomly anymore. They were setting traps, waiting patiently for any sign of activity to return to the area. This news made the beacon project both more urgent and more dangerous. Mara worked long hours each day, teaching a small group of curious young Threll, among them a quick-fingered girl named Sella, how to strip wiring, test connections, and understand the strange human technology piece by piece. Sella, in particular, showed a natural gift for understanding how the broken pieces fit together, often solving small problems faster than Mara herself could explain them. "Where I come from," Mara told her one evening, using careful, simple words. "Some of the greatest engineers started exactly like you, curious, patient, not afraid to try even when things did not work the first time." Sella smiled at this, a small, proud expression that reminded Mara achingly of home, of nieces and nephews she had not seen in over a year, of a life that felt impossibly far away now. Thassa watched these small moments with quiet interest. She rarely spoke about it directly, but Mara noticed the elder observing the growing bond between the human stranger and the youngest members of the clan, as though weighing what it meant for the future, a future that might, if the beacon worked, include contact with a much larger, much stranger galaxy than the Threll had ever imagined possible. By the end of the second week in the new camp, the beacon's basic frame was complete, though it remained unpowered, missing several critical parts that had been too damaged in the crash to repair with what little tools and materials the clan possessed. Mara began making careful trips back toward the crash site itself, always accompanied by Ren and at least one other armed scout, searching for anything salvageable among the wreckage that might still be usable. Each trip carried enormous risk. The crash site was exactly the kind of location the Dominion patrols would continue watching closely. But each successful trip also brought them closer to a working beacon, closer to a signal that might, if fortune allowed it, finally bring help from beyond the stars. For Mara, and perhaps, if Thassa's quiet hope proved true, for the Threll people as well. The trips to the crash site became a routine, though never a safe one. Each time, Mara, Ren, and a rotating group of scouts moved through the forest before dawn, when Dominion patrol activity was lowest, searching the twisted wreckage of the Wandering Star for anything that might still work. Most of the ship's systems were destroyed beyond repair, crushed under fallen trees, or burned black by the crash fire. But piece by piece, they recovered what they needed. A power cell, a length of undamaged cable, a small transmitter dish that had somehow survived the impact intact. On one of these trips, disaster nearly struck. A Dominion patrol ship passed low overhead while the group was still exposed near the wreckage. Ren reacted instantly, pulling Mara down into a shallow ditch and covering her with fallen branches, while the rest of the scouts scattered into the tree line. The patrol ship hovered for a long, terrifying moment, its sensors sweeping the crash site below. Mara held her breath, feeling Ren's hand pressed firmly against her shoulder, keeping her still. After what felt like an eternity, the patrol ship moved on, apparently satisfied that the wreckage held nothing of interest. Ren let out a slow breath and helped Mara to her feet, his expression grim. "They are getting closer," he said quietly. "We do not have much more time." Back at the camp, Mara worked with new urgency, assembling the beacon piece by piece with Sella's eager help. The device was crude by human engineering standards, a mismatched collection of salvaged parts held together with wire, sap-based adhesive, and careful hands. But the core function remained intact. If powered correctly, it could send a distress signal strong enough to escape the moon's atmosphere and reach open space, where automated relay stations along common Terran trade and patrol routes might detect it. The final piece needed was a stable power source strong enough to drive the transmitter without immediately burning out. Mara's search turned to the one remaining intact component from the ship, the auxiliary power core, still sitting in the crushed engine section of the wreckage, too heavy and too dangerous to have moved earlier. Retrieving it would require a longer, riskier trip, deep enough into the wreckage that a full patrol sweep would almost certainly be needed to keep watch. Thassa called a council meeting to discuss the plan. Some argued against it, fearing the risk was too great, that a failed attempt could expose the entire clan's location. Others, including Ren, argued that they had already come too far to stop now. Thassa listened to both sides carefully before making her decision. "We built this village on small acts of quiet resistance," she said. "Hiding when we can, helping when we must, refusing to disappear completely, no matter what the Dominion takes from us. This is simply the next quiet act of resistance. We will go together, carefully, and we will succeed." The retrieval mission took place 3 nights later, under the cover of a heavy forest storm that Thassa believed would mask their movements from Dominion sensors. Mara, Ren, Sela, who had insisted on coming despite her young age, arguing she understood the power core's wiring better than anyone else in the village, and 4 additional scouts moved through the storm-soaked forest toward the crash site. The power core was heavier and more awkward than expected, requiring careful teamwork to free it from the crushed engine housing without damaging its delicate internal components. Rain poured down around them as they worked, thunder rolling overhead, each flash of lightning briefly illuminating the wreckage in stark white light. Mara's hands shook, partly from cold, partly from fear, as she guided the group through the careful extraction process, drawing on training and memory from a life that felt, in this moment, impossibly distant. They succeeded. The power core was freed, wrapped carefully in waterproof cloth, and carried back toward the hidden camp, just as the storm began to weaken. Exhausted, soaked, but triumphant, the group returned before dawn, the final piece of the beacon finally within reach. It took 2 more days to properly integrate the power core into the beacon's design, testing and retesting the connections to ensure the device would not simply burn out the moment it was activated. Sela proved invaluable during this process, her small, careful hands able to manage delicate wiring work that Mara's larger fingers struggled with. Finally, the beacon was ready. The village gathered on the evening of activation, a mixture of hope and fear visible on every face. Thassa stood beside Mara as she made the final connections, the small transmitter dish angled carefully toward a break in the forest canopy that would allow its signal a clear path skyward. "Once this is sent," Mara said, addressing the gathered clan in her now much improved grasp of their language, "the Dominion will detect it. They will know something unusual happened here. It may bring danger before it brings help." "We know," Thassa answered simply. "We decided this together." "Send it." Mara activated the beacon. A low hum built steadily within the device, growing louder, more intense, until finally, a bright pulse of light shot upward from the transmitter dish, cutting briefly through the forest canopy, before disappearing into the night sky. The signal, encoded with Mara's identification codes and a simple distress call, raced outward from the moon's surface, passing through the atmosphere, out into the vast darkness of open space. For a long moment, the clearing remained silent, everyone staring upward as though they might somehow see the signal continuing its journey through the stars. Then, far in the distance, an alarm sounded. A deep, mechanical wail carried faintly on the night wind from the direction of the nearest Dominion garrison. They had detected the transmission. Ren's expression hardened instantly. "They will trace the signal's origin point within hours," he said. "We need to move again, now, before they narrow the search." The village erupted into careful, practiced motion, gathering essential supplies, preparing to abandon the second camp, just as they had abandoned the first. Mara helped where she could, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Somewhere out among the stars, her signal was traveling, carrying her call for help toward whatever ships might be listening along the quiet edges of known space. But closer, much closer, Dominion forces were already beginning to move, their search patterns tightening around the region where the signal had originated. The quiet, hidden existence the Threll clan had maintained for so long was now, undeniably, at serious risk. A risk they had chosen willingly, together, for the sake of a stranger who had fallen from their sky, and the fragile hope that her people might somehow repay the kindness that had been given so freely. As dawn broke over the forest, the clan moved once more into hiding, carrying with them not just their remaining possessions, but a new, fragile hope that had not existed before. The hope that somewhere out among the endless stars, help was finally on its way. The third camp was chosen quickly, out of necessity rather than careful planning. It sat in a narrow ravine several hours' walk from the second camp, surrounded by steep rock walls that would make it harder for Dominion ground patrols to approach unseen, though it offered little protection from aerial sensor sweeps. Thassa did not like the location, but there had been no time to search for anything better. Mara spent the following days helping wherever she could, though guilt gnawed at her constantly. She had brought this danger to these people. She had asked them to risk everything on a signal that might take days, or weeks, or might never be answered at all. Watching families move for the second time in a month, watching elders struggle over rocky terrain, watching children go quiet and watchful instead of playing freely, she began to understand the true weight of what she had asked of them. She said as much to Thassa one evening, sitting near a small, carefully hidden fire. "If this signal is never answered," Mara said quietly, "I will have brought all of this suffering onto your people for nothing." Thassa considered this for a long moment before answering. "You did not force us to help you," she said. "We chose it, with open eyes, understanding the risk. Even if your people never come, we chose correctly, because we chose kindness over fear. That choice matters, regardless of what happens next." Mara did not fully believe those words could ease her guilt, but she held on to them anyway, a small comfort in the middle of growing uncertainty. Ren kept watch most nights now, along with a rotating group of scouts, tracking the movement of Dominion patrols from a safe distance. His reports grew more troubling each day. The patrols were no longer simply sweeping wide areas at random. They had narrowed their search into a tightening circle, moving methodically closer to the ravine where the clan now hid. Somewhere within the Dominion garrison, officers were clearly piecing together the direction of the mysterious signal and closing the distance step by careful step. Sela, who had grown close to Mara over the weeks of building the beacon together, asked her one quiet afternoon what her home looked like, what her people were like, whether they would truly come if the signal reached them. Mara tried to explain, using simple words the young Threll girl could understand, of blue skies and wide oceans, of cities built not from fear but from stubborn hope, of a people who had once fought endless wars among themselves before finally learning, slowly and painfully, that strength meant nothing without the courage to protect those who could not protect themselves. "My people are not perfect," Mara admitted. "We have made many mistakes, but if this signal reaches them, they will come, not because it is easy, and not because there is anything here for them to gain. They will come, because that is simply what my people do, when someone in need calls for help." Sela considered this for a long moment, then nodded slowly, as though filing the words away carefully for later. Above them, the sky remained dark and quiet, giving no sign of what was coming. Whether rescue, or ruin, or both together, riding down from the stars toward the small, hidden ravine where a handful of frightened but determined people now waited, watching and hoping. The attack came at dawn, 6 days after the beacon's signal had been sent into the stars. Ren's scouts had given what warning they could, but the Dominion force moved faster than anyone expected, dropping from the sky in 3 sleek gunships that landed at the mouth of the ravine before most of the camp had even finished waking. Armored soldiers poured out of the ships, weapons raised, moving with the cold, practiced efficiency of a force that had done this many times before, in many villages, against many frightened people who had nothing to fight back with. Thassa's voice cut through the chaos, calling for the children and elders to retreat deeper into the ravine, toward a narrow crack in the rock wall that led to a hidden tunnel system the clan had discovered weeks earlier but never needed until now. Ren and the other hunters moved to form a thin, desperate line between the advancing soldiers and the fleeing villagers, armed with nothing more than hunting spears, sharpened stones, and whatever courage they could summon in the face of overwhelming force. Mara grabbed a length of metal pipe salvaged from the wreckage, one of the few tools she had that resembled anything like a weapon, and moved to stand beside Ren. He glanced at her, surprise briefly crossing his face. "Go with the others," he said. "This is not your fight. It became my fight the moment your people saved my life," Mara answered. "I am not running while you stand here." There was no more time for argument. The Dominion soldiers advanced, their weapons firing warning shots that tore through the trees above the retreating villagers, driving them faster toward the hidden tunnel entrance. Ren's line held for only a few desperate minutes, using the narrow terrain of the ravine to slow the soldiers' advance, using knowledge of the land that the Dominion troops did not possess. Mara fought using tactics she remembered from basic coalition survival training, using cover, timing movements carefully, striking only when an opening presented itself, rather than meeting the heavily armored soldiers head-on. She managed to disable one soldier's weapon by jamming her metal pipe into its mechanism, buying precious seconds for two fleeing Thrall families to reach the tunnel entrance safely. But the numbers were simply too uneven. One by one, the defenders were forced back, injured, or captured. Ren took a glancing hit from a stun weapon that dropped him to his knees, and Mara, in a desperate attempt to pull him back toward cover, was struck as well, pain exploding through her side as she collapsed beside him. Through blurred vision, she saw Thassa emerge from the tunnel entrance, moving directly toward the advancing Dominion soldiers, her hands raised, empty, in open surrender. "Stop," Thassa's voice rang out clearly across the ravine. "The ones you are chasing are already safe. There is no reason for more violence here." The lead Dominion officer, a tall, armored figure whose face was hidden behind a dark visor, studied the old Thrall elder for a long moment before speaking, his voice distorted and cold through his helmet speaker. "We are not here for your village, elder. We are here for the alien signal detected 6 nights ago. Surrender the human, and the rest of your people may yet be spared." Mara, still struggling against the pain radiating through her body, tried to push herself upright, tried to call out that she would go with them willingly if it meant sparing the village further harm. But before she could speak, Thassa answered first, her voice steady despite the danger surrounding her. "There is no human here," Thassa said. "You are chasing a signal that came from wreckage, nothing more. Search if you must, but you will find only broken metal and empty homes." It was a desperate lie, and a brave one, buying time even as Dominion soldiers began systematically searching the ravine, moving toward the very spot where Mara and Ren lay injured behind a screen of fallen branches. Mara knew, with sick certainty, that the lie would not hold for long. She was right. Within minutes, a soldier's sensor swept across their hiding place, detecting the unmistakable biological signature of a human body. Soldiers moved in immediately, weapons raised, surrounding both Mara and the wounded Ren. Thassa's composure broke for the first time, her voice rising in protest as soldiers dragged Mara roughly to her feet. "She is under my protection," the elder shouted. "Take me instead, but leave her." A soldier struck Thassa across the face with the back of an armored hand, silencing her mid-sentence and sending the old elder crumpling to the ground. Fury exploded through Mara's pain-clouded mind, and despite her injuries, despite the impossible odds, she lunged forward, driving her shoulder into the nearest soldier with every ounce of strength she had left. It was not enough. Within seconds she was subdued, her hands bound, a heavy weapon pressed against the back of her neck as she was forced to her knees beside Ren and the barely conscious Thassa. The Dominion officer approached slowly, studying Mara with cold curiosity through his dark visor. "So this is the creature that caused so much trouble," he said. "An entire clan, risking everything, for one stray alien too foolish to avoid crashing on the wrong world." "They saved my life," Mara spat back, ignoring the pain in her side. "Because they are better than you will ever understand. You will regret this." The officer laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Regret, little creature? You have no idea what real power looks like. Your people, whoever they are light years away, unaware you even exist. No one is coming to save you." Around them, the sounds of the raid continued, soldiers searching remaining structures, rounding up the few villagers who had not escaped through the tunnel in time, the harsh crackle of Dominion communication systems, reporting the successful capture back to the garrison command. Smoke began rising from several of the camp's simple structures, deliberately set ablaze as a warning to any Thrall who might consider offering shelter to outsiders again in the future. Mara, forced to watch this destruction unfold around her, felt something shift inside her chest. Grief, yes, and fear, but beneath both of those, something harder, colder, more determined. She thought of the beacon's signal, still traveling through the endless dark of space, carrying her call for help toward a galaxy that did not yet know what had happened here, on this small, forgotten moon, to a people who had asked for nothing except the right to survive. "They will come," she told herself, holding on to the thought like a lifeline as the Dominion soldiers marched her, Ren, and the injured Thassa toward a waiting transport ship. "My people will come, and when they do, this debt will be repaid, in full." Behind them, the ravine burned quietly in the pale morning light, the last visible trace of a village that had chosen kindness over safety, and was now paying the price for that choice. Not everyone had been caught. Deep within the hidden tunnel system, Sela crouched in the darkness alongside a small group of children and elders, listening to the muffled sounds of destruction above them. She had wanted to run back, to help, to do something, anything, but the older Thrall beside her had held her back firmly, whispering that running back now would only mean one more captured, one more lost, with nothing gained. So she waited, tears streaking silently down her face, gripping a small scrap of wire, salvaged from the beacon project, a strange, small keepsake of the friend she feared she might never see again. Hours passed before the tunnel group dared to emerge, creeping cautiously back toward the ravine, once the sounds of Dominion ships had faded into the distance. What they found was devastating. Homes reduced to smoking ruins, supplies scattered and destroyed, and worst of all, the clear signs that several of their own, including Thassa, Ren, and the strange human stranger who had fallen from the sky, were simply gone, taken by the very soldiers who had burned everything else behind them. The surviving villagers gathered in the ruins of the ravine that evening, shaken and grieving, uncertain what to do next. Some argued for scattering completely, abandoning any hope of rescue and simply trying to survive as individuals or small family groups, hidden far from any further Dominion attention. Others, led by a hunter named Kor who had survived the raid by hiding in the tree line during the worst of the fighting, argued that scattering now would mean losing each other completely, perhaps forever. It was Sela, young as she was, who spoke the words that ultimately held the group together. Mara said her people would come, she said, her small voice trembling but clear. She said it was simply what her people do when someone calls for help. If there is even a small chance she is right, we need to still be here, together, when they arrive. Otherwise, everything we already gave up will have meant nothing. The argument was not fully resolved that night, but the surviving villagers chose, for now, to remain together, moving only far enough to find safer shelter among the rocks farther up the ravine, staying close enough to the original camp that any rescue attempt might still find them. Meanwhile, aboard the Dominion transport ship carrying her away from everything she had come to care about, Mara sat in a cramped holding cell beside Ren and Thassa, both still recovering from their injuries. The old elder's face was bruised, but her eyes remained sharp, watching Mara with quiet, steady patience, despite everything that had happened. "You did not have to defend me back there," Mara said quietly, guilt heavy in her voice. "You could have let them take only me." Thassa shook her head slowly. "We do not measure kindness by convenience," she said. "We chose to protect you from the first night we found you. That choice did not end simply because the danger grew larger. It only mattered more." Ren, leaning weakly against the cell wall, managed a faint, tired smile. "Besides," he added, "if your people truly come as you say, I intend to still be alive to see it." Mara found herself, despite the pain, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty of what awaited them at the Dominion garrison, holding on to a small, stubborn spark of hope. The same hope that had carried the beacon's signal out into the endless dark of space, still traveling, still searching for someone, somewhere, who might finally answer the call. Light years away, in a quiet sector of space patrolled by the Terran Coalition, an automated relay station drifted silently among the stars, its sensors constantly scanning the surrounding darkness for any sign of distress signals, trade traffic, or unusual activity. For most of its long operational life, the station had detected little of interest: the occasional merchant vessel, routine Coalition patrol reports, background radiation from distant stars. On this particular day, its sensors picked up something different. A weak, distorted signal arrived, degraded by distance and interference, but still carrying, buried deep within its structure, a recognizable Coalition distress code and a personal identification signature, belonging to a survey officer, listed as missing 3 weeks earlier. The relay station automatically flagged the signal as high priority and forwarded it immediately toward the nearest Coalition command outpost. At Coalition Outpost Meridian, the signal reached the desk of Commander Elias Grant, a senior officer responsible for overseeing search and rescue operations across a wide, sparsely patrolled region of space. Grant had long ago grown accustomed to the quiet tragedy of his work. Most distress signals that took this long to arrive belonged to officers who were already dead. Their final transmissions simply echoes of tragedies long since concluded. But something about this particular signal caught his attention immediately. The distress code belonged to Lieutenant Mara Voss, a survey officer whose ship had gone missing near a small, largely unmapped moon on the far edge of Coalition-monitored space. What made the signal unusual was not simply that it had arrived at all, 3 weeks after her disappearance, but the technical details embedded within its structure. Grant called in his technical analyst, a sharp young officer named Priya Nandan, to examine the signal more closely. After several hours of careful analysis, Nandan delivered her findings with visible excitement. "Commander, this signal wasn't sent using standard survey ship equipment," she explained, pulling up detailed schematics on the briefing room's main display. The transmission pattern shows clear signs of improvised construction, mismatched components, non-standard power regulation, manual calibration adjustments that no automated system would make. Someone built this beacon by hand, using salvaged parts, likely from the wreckage of Lieutenant Voss's own ship. Grant studied the data carefully. "You're saying she survived the crash and built this herself?" "Not alone, sir," Nandan said, pulling up another dataset. "There are trace chemical signatures embedded in the material composition of several beacon components, organic compounds consistent with local plant life from the target moon. Whoever helped build this beacon had detailed knowledge of both human technology and the local environment. Commander, I don't think Lieutenant Voss built this alone. I think she had help. Local help." The implications settled slowly across the briefing room. The moon in question, according to Coalition survey records, fell within a region increasingly associated with expansion activity by the Kryvax Dominion, a militaristic power known for aggressive territorial claims and harsh treatment of weaker species, unfortunate enough to possess resources the Dominion desired. Grant reviewed the limited existing intelligence on the region carefully. Scattered reports suggested the presence of an indigenous species on the moon, gentle and non-aggressive by all available accounts, currently suffering under Dominion occupation, with no meaningful outside support. If Nandan's analysis was correct, this indigenous species, whoever they were, had not only encountered a stranded human survivor, but had apparently chosen to help her survive, and further, had helped her construct and transmit a distress signal at what was almost certainly significant personal risk to themselves. This was not simply a routine rescue mission anymore. This was something the Coalition took very seriously, something woven deeply into both official military doctrine and the broader cultural identity that had shaped humanity's expansion into the stars. The unbreakable principle that humanity did not abandon those who stood by them, regardless of species, regardless of the size or strength of the ally in question, regardless of the cost required to answer that debt in full. Grant brought the matter immediately to Coalition Fleet Command, presenting Nandan's full analysis alongside his own recommendation. What began as a routine missing officer case rapidly escalated through multiple layers of command review, each officer recognizing the same critical detail Grant had identified. An unknown, vulnerable species had risked everything to protect a single-stranded human, receiving nothing in return but the danger of Dominion retaliation. Within 48 hours, Fleet Admiral Sarah Whitcomb, commanding the 3rd Coalition Fleet stationed nearest the affected region, received full authorization to mobilize a response force. The mission briefing, delivered to assembled fleet officers aboard the flagship Endeavor's Promise, was unusually direct in its framing. "This is not simply a rescue mission," Whitcomb told her assembled officers, her voice carrying clearly across the briefing hall. "Lieutenant Voss is alive, or was recently alive, because an entire community of strangers chose to protect her, at what the evidence strongly suggests was significant cost to themselves. We do not yet know their fate. We do not yet know the full situation on the ground. What we do know is this: humanity's reputation among the stars was not built on convenience. It was built on showing up, fully, decisively, when someone stands by us in our moment of need. Today, we honor that reputation." The fleet mobilized rapidly, a mixed force of cruisers, support vessels, and rapid response ground units, all moving under Whitcomb's direct command toward the coordinates identified in the beacon's transmission data. The journey would take several days at maximum sustainable speed. time that weighed heavily on Grant as he monitored the mission's progress from Outpost Meridian, knowing that every hour that passed increased the risk that whatever community had helped Lieutenant Voss might not survive long enough to see the rescue arrive. Aboard the Endeavor's Promise. Preparations continued around the clock. Ground assault teams reviewed limited available intelligence on Dominion garrison strength in the region. Medical teams prepared for the possibility of treating both human and unknown alien casualties. Diplomatic officers, included at Whitcomb's specific insistence, prepared materials for potential first contact with the species that had risked everything to help one of their own. Whitcomb herself spent long hours reviewing the beacon's technical data, studying Nandan's detailed analysis of its construction, trying to understand, as best she could from cold engineering data alone, something about the nature of the people who had built it. The improvised nature of the design spoke of resourcefulness under pressure. The careful, precise calibration spoke of patience and skill, and the simple fact that it had been built at all, in defiance of the obvious danger involved, spoke of a courage Whitcomb found herself deeply respecting, even before making contact with a single member of the species responsible. "Whoever they are," she said quietly to Grant during one of their regular status updates, transmitted across the growing distance between the fleet and Outpost Meridian. "They deserve to know that their kindness was not wasted. We are going to make sure of that." As the coalition fleet continued its approach, closing the distance day by day toward the small, troubled moon at the edge of Dominion-claimed space, none of the officers aboard yet knew the full situation awaiting them. The burned ravine, the captured elder and hunter, the scattered survivors still holding on to a fragile, uncertain hope that help might yet arrive in time. But the fleet came anyway, driven by a principle older than the coalition itself, one that had guided humanity's conduct among the stars since its first tentative steps beyond its home solar system. A debt of protection, once recognized, would always, without exception, be repaid. 3 days into the journey, a smaller scout vessel, the Quiet Herald, was detached from the main fleet and sent ahead at higher speed, tasked with gathering closer intelligence before the larger force arrived. Its small crew, led by a cautious but capable officer named Lieutenant Commander Iris Okafor, approached the outer edge of the system carefully, using passive sensors only, avoiding any transmission that might alert Dominion forces to their presence before the main fleet was ready to strike. What Okafor's team found, once close enough to gather detailed sensor readings, was troubling. Thermal imaging revealed a burned settlement in a narrow ravine, consistent with the coordinates from which the original beacon signal had originated. Additional scans detected a fortified Dominion garrison on the far side of the moon, larger and more heavily defended than initial intelligence estimates had suggested, along with at least one heavily guarded transport ship that had recently arrived at the garrison, its cargo manifest, when partially decrypted, suggesting the presence of prisoners. Okafor transmitted this information back to Admiral Whitcomb, using a tight, low-power burst signal designed to avoid detection. The report painted a grim but clarifying picture. Lieutenant Voss, and likely several of the local inhabitants who had helped her, were probably being held at the garrison itself, which meant any rescue operation would need to account for both a full military engagement and a delicate hostage recovery, executed simultaneously, with minimal room for error. Whitcomb absorbed this information with the calm focus of an officer who had planned for worse scenarios many times before. She adjusted the fleet's approach vector slightly, coordinating with her tactical staff to develop a battle plan that would prioritize speed and overwhelming initial force, designed to prevent the garrison from having time to execute any prisoners before coalition ground teams could reach them. "We move as one strike," she told her assembled officers during a final briefing before the fleet's arrival. "No hesitation, no half measures. Whoever is being held down there, Lieutenant Voss, and whoever chose to stand beside her, they have waited long enough for us to answer their call. We will not make them wait a moment longer than necessary." The fleet pressed onward through the dark, silent void between the stars, closing the final distance toward a small, troubled moon that was about to witness, for the first time, exactly what it meant to have earned humanity's gratitude. Inside the Dominion garrison, deep within a heavily guarded detention block, Mara Voss sat against a cold metal wall, her wrists bound, her body aching from days of harsh questioning. Beside her, Ren remained mostly silent, conserving what strength he had left, while across the small cell, Thassa watched the door with quiet, unwavering patience, as though waiting for something she alone still believed would come. The Dominion officers had questioned Mara repeatedly, demanding information about her ship, her people, the extent of Coalition presence in the region. She had given them nothing beyond her name, rank, and identification number, following Coalition protocol, even as exhaustion and pain made every hour feel longer than the last. She did not know if her beacon signal had ever been received. She did not know if help was coming, or if she and her companions would simply disappear here, forgotten, in a Dominion detention cell on a moon far from anyone who might ever learn the truth of what happened. Then, without warning, the garrison's alarms began to scream. Mara sat upright immediately, adrenaline cutting through her exhaustion. Through the cell's small barred window, she saw flashes of light in the distant sky, followed seconds later by the deep, rolling sound of distant explosions. Dominion soldiers ran past the detention block in organized chaos, shouting orders, weapons raised, responding to something happening far above the garrison itself. "What is it?" Ren asked, struggling to his feet despite his injuries. Mara felt a fierce, disbelieving hope rising in her chest. "I think," she said slowly, hardly daring to believe her own words, "my people found us." Above the moon, the Coalition fleet had arrived in full force, dropping out of faster-than-light travel, directly into the system, with practiced, overwhelming coordination. Dominion sensor operators, caught completely unprepared for a force of this size, scrambled to raise defenses as Coalition cruisers began systematically targeting garrison defense platforms, disabling orbital weapons before they could mount any meaningful resistance. Admiral Whitcomb, watching the engagement unfold from the Endeavor's promise. Command deck gave calm, precise orders as her fleet executed the opening phase of the attack exactly as planned. "Ground teams, you are cleared for immediate deployment," she said. "Priority 1 is the detention block. Get our people out." Coalition dropships descended rapidly through the chaos of the ongoing orbital engagement, carrying elite ground assault teams directly toward the garrison's surface facilities. Lieutenant Commander Okafor, leading the primary extraction team, coordinated the assault with practiced efficiency, using detailed schematics gathered during the Quiet Heralds. Earlier reconnaissance to guide her team directly toward the detention block with minimal wasted movement. The garrison's ground defenses, though caught off guard, still fought back fiercely. Dominion soldiers, trained and equipped for exactly this kind of engagement, mounted a desperate defense around key facilities, including the detention block itself. Fierce fighting broke out in the corridors surrounding Mara's cell, the sound of weapons fire growing steadily louder and closer. Inside the cell, Mara worked quickly, using a small piece of metal she had managed to conceal from her captors during the initial search, attempting to pick at the lock mechanism on the cell door. Thassa watched with calm interest, while Ren kept careful watch through the small window, reporting the shifting patterns of chaos outside. "They are fighting something," Ren reported. "Dominion soldiers are retreating from the eastern corridor." Moments later, the cell door was blown inward by a controlled charge, smoke filling the small space as armored figures moved through the opening with practiced precision. Mara raised her bound hands instinctively, then felt a rush of overwhelming relief as she recognized the unmistakable design of Coalition combat armor. "Lieutenant Voss?" one of the soldiers called out, quickly moving to cut the binding on her wrists. "Commander Okafor's team, we're getting you out." "There are others with me," Mara said immediately, gesturing toward Thassa and Ren. "They protected me. They stay with me, or I'm not leaving." The soldier hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Understood. Everyone moves together." The extraction team guided all three of them quickly through the smoke-filled corridors, moving toward a designated evacuation point where a Coalition dropship waited under heavy escort. Along the way, Mara caught sight of additional Threll prisoners being freed from nearby cells, other members of her clan who had been captured during subsequent Dominion sweeps of the surrounding forest in the days following the initial raid. Aboard the dropship, as it lifted away from the burning garrison and climbed toward the relative safety of the fleet above, Mara finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. Relief, exhaustion, grief for what had been lost, and a fierce, protective determination that this would not be the end of the story for the people who had saved her life. The orbital battle continued for several more hours, but the outcome was rarely in doubt once the Coalition fleet's full strength became clear. Dominion warships, outmatched and outmaneuvered, either retreated toward the system's edge, or were systematically disabled by coordinated Coalition strikes. By the time the sun rose fully over the moon's forested surface, the Dominion garrison had been effectively neutralized, its remaining forces surrendering rather than facing continued destruction. Mara, treated for her injuries aboard the Endeavor's Promise, insisted on speaking with Admiral Whitcomb as soon as she was medically cleared. She explained, in careful detail, everything that had happened since her crash, Thassa's decision to save her, the clan's sacrifice in helping build and launch the beacon, the devastating raid that had followed, and the scattered survivors who might still be hiding somewhere in the forests below, uncertain whether help had truly arrived. Whitcomb listened carefully, her expression growing more resolved with each detail Mara shared. "Lieutenant," she said finally, "you have my word. We are not simply going to extract you and leave. We are going to find every remaining member of that clan, and we are going to make certain the Dominion never threatens them again." Search and rescue teams deployed immediately across the forested regions surrounding the ravine, using the beacon's original coordinates as a starting point. Mara insisted on joining these efforts personally, despite her ongoing recovery, guiding Coalition search teams through the terrain she had come to know during her weeks living among the Threll. The search proved successful. Deep in the rocky shelter farther up the ravine, Coalition teams located the surviving members of Thassa's clan, including Sela, who had kept the small scrap of beacon wire safely hidden through everything that had happened since the raid. When Mara emerged from the tree line alongside Coalition soldiers, Sela's disbelieving joy was immediate and overwhelming, the young Threll girl rushing forward despite the caution of the adults around her. "You came back," Sela said, tears streaking down her face. "You said your people would come, and you came back." Mara knelt down despite the lingering pain in her side, embracing the young girl fully. "I told you," she said softly. "This is simply what my people do." Around them, Coalition medical and support teams began the careful work of assisting the surviving villagers, providing medical care, food, and shelter, while Whitcomb herself arrived personally to meet with Thassa, now recovering aboard the fleet's medical facilities alongside Wren, to discuss what would come next for a people who had risked everything for the sake of a single stranger, and were now, finally, being repaid for that extraordinary kindness in full. The meeting between Whitcomb and Thassa took place in a quiet observation room aboard the Endeavor's Promise, with Mara present to help translate whenever the Elder's growing but still limited grasp of Coalition standard fell short. Thassa studied the human admiral carefully, the same patient, measuring gaze she had once turned on a broken, bleeding stranger inside a crashed ship weeks earlier. "Your people came in great numbers," Thassa said slowly, "and great strength, for the sake of one small officer, and a handful of strangers she had only just met. I do not fully understand this. My people have watched galactic powers pass over us for generations, unwilling to spend even the smallest effort on our behalf." Whitcomb considered her words carefully before answering. "Strength without purpose is empty, Elder Thassa. My people learned, at great cost, a long time ago, that the measure of any people is found in how they treat those who cannot repay them. You gave everything you had for Lieutenant Voss, expecting nothing in return. We simply could not allow that kind of courage to go unanswered." Wren, listening quietly from a nearby chair, spoke up for the first time since the meeting began. "What happens now? To my people? To this moon?" "That," Whitcomb said, "is largely up to you. But the Coalition does not intend to simply leave once the immediate danger has passed. If your people are willing, we would like to establish a lasting relationship. Protection from further Dominion aggression, medical and technical support to help rebuild what has been lost, and formal recognition of the Threll as an independent, protected people under Coalition law." Thassa was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the full weight of what was being offered. It was more than she had ever dared hope for, standing in the wreckage of her people's slow, grinding destruction, only weeks earlier. Finally, she looked toward Mara, meeting the human officer's eyes with something like quiet gratitude. "It seems," Thassa said softly, "that saving one small, foolish stranger was not such a foolish choice after all." Mara smiled, despite everything, despite the exhaustion and grief and lingering pain of the past weeks. "No," she agreed, "it really wasn't. 3 months passed after the battle above Threl Kar, and the small moon that had once hidden a frightened, scattered people now stood at the center of a quiet but significant transformation. The Dominion garrison, thoroughly defeated during the Coalition's decisive intervention, had been permanently dismantled, its remaining forces withdrawn under the terms of a formal Coalition demand, backed by continued fleet presence in the system. In its place, a small but steady Coalition support base had been established, staffed by engineers, medical personnel, and diplomatic officers, tasked with helping the Threl people rebuild what years of occupation had taken from them. Mara Voss, having fully recovered from her injuries, chose to remain assigned to the support mission rather than return immediately to standard Coalition duty elsewhere. She had requested the posting personally, and Admiral Whitcomb, recognizing both the unique trust Mara had built with the Threl people and the symbolic importance of her continued presence, had approved the request without hesitation. The village that had once hidden in fear now stood rebuilt in the open, no longer needing to hide beneath the forest canopy or scatter at the first sign of patrol activity overhead. New homes had been constructed, some using traditional Threl methods, others incorporating simple Coalition technology, offered freely as part of the support mission's ongoing efforts. Food supplies, once desperately scarce, now flowed steadily from Coalition logistics support, giving the clan room to focus on rebuilding rather than simple survival. Thassa, though aging and still recovering fully from the injuries sustained during the Dominion raid, had taken on a new role as the primary liaison between her people and the growing Coalition presence on their world. She approached this responsibility with the same careful, patient wisdom that had guided her decision to save a single-stranded human stranger months earlier, working tirelessly to ensure that her people's voice remained central in every decision made about their future. Ren, meanwhile, had thrown himself fully into training alongside Coalition personnel, eager to learn skills that might help his people better defend themselves should danger ever threaten them again. He had proven a quick, dedicated student, and Coalition officers spoke increasingly of the possibility of formal Threl participation in joint defense training programs, a small but meaningful step toward the kind of self-sufficiency Ren clearly valued deeply. And Sela, whose natural talent for understanding complex technology had first revealed itself during the desperate construction of Mara's makeshift beacon, had become something of an informal apprentice among the Coalition's small team of engineers stationed at the new support base. She spent hours each day studying alongside them, her curiosity and skill impressing even veteran Coalition technicians, who began speaking, half-jokingly, of the possibility that she might one day study formally at a Coalition engineering academy, should she wish to pursue it. On a quiet evening, several months into the rebuilding effort, Mara stood beside Thassa near the edge of the newly rebuilt village, watching as Coalition engineers worked alongside Threl craftspeople to complete a new central gathering hall, a building meant to serve both as a community space and a permanent, physical symbol of the alliance now binding their two peoples together. "It is strange," Thassa said quietly, watching the construction with thoughtful eyes, "to remember how frightened we once were, simply for helping one stranger survive a single night. Now our world stands protected, rebuilt, and free, because of that same small choice." Mara nodded slowly, feeling the truth of those words settle deeply within her. "Kindness is rarely wasted," she said. "It just doesn't always show its full value right away." Word of what had happened on Threl Kar spread steadily through Coalition space in the months that followed, carried through official reports, informal accounts from fleet personnel involved in the rescue operation, and eventually, wider public acknowledgement as the story became known throughout human-settled systems. It became, in time, a widely told example of a principle the Coalition held central to its identity among the stars, that no act of kindness shown toward a stranded, vulnerable human would ever go unanswered, regardless of how small, how distant, or how seemingly insignificant the ally who offered that kindness might initially appear. Other species, watching from the edges of Coalition space, took quiet note of what had happened. Some had long assumed, based on experience with powers like the Dominion, that only strength and resources determined whether a struggling people received outside help. The story of the Threl, small and previously unknown, suddenly protected and uplifted, simply because they had chosen compassion over self-preservation, challenged that assumption in ways that rippled quietly outward across known space. Admiral Whitcomb, reflecting on the mission during a later address to Coalition command staff, summarized the significance of what had occurred in words that would later be repeated often among Coalition military circles. "We did not send our fleet to Threlkar simply to rescue one officer," she said. "We sent it to honor a debt, freely given, by people who owed us nothing. That is who we choose to be, among the stars, not simply strong, worthy of the trust others place in us, even when that trust costs them everything." Back on Threlkar, as the new gathering hall neared completion, Mara found herself standing once more beside the ravine where the beacon had first been launched into the stars, the scarred earth around it slowly healing, new growth pushing steadily up through ground that had once burned under Dominion fire. Sella joined her there, carrying the same small scrap of beacon wire she had kept safely hidden through everything that followed, now polished and worn smooth from months of careful handling. "I want to keep this," Sella said, showing the small piece of wire to Mara. "To remember that even the smallest thing can start something enormous, if enough people care enough to see it through." Mara smiled, thinking of everything that single piece of wire represented. A crashed ship, a frightened stranger, a village that chose courage over safety, a signal sent desperately into the endless dark, and a fleet that answered that call fully, decisively, without hesitation, because that was simply what her people did. When someone who deserved protection called out for help. "Keep it," Mara said softly. "You earned it more than anyone." Above them, the twin moons of Threlkar rose slowly into a sky no longer watched by Dominion patrol ships, but instead guarded quietly, steadily, by the protective presence of Coalition vessels stationed to ensure that what had been rebuilt here would never again be threatened, never again be forced into hiding, never again be forgotten by a galaxy too often willing to look away from those too small or too distant to demand attention on their own. In the weeks that followed, a formal ceremony was held at the newly completed gathering hall, marking the official signing of the Coalition Threll Protection Agreement. Representatives from several nearby Coalition outposts traveled to attend, along with a small honor detachment from the Endeavor's Promise. Standing alongside Threll villagers dressed in their finest woven garments, decorated with patterns that told the old stories of their people, stories that had once seemed destined to end quietly, unnoticed, in the shadow of Dominion occupation. Thassa spoke first at the ceremony, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd despite her advancing age. She spoke of loss, of fear, of the long years spent hiding from a power that saw her people as nothing more than an obstacle to be cleared away. But she spoke also of the night a stranger fell from the sky, injured and helpless, and of the choice her people made in that moment. A choice that had, against every reasonable expectation, changed everything that followed. "We did not save her because we believed she could save us in return," Thassa said. "We saved her because it was right, and because we still had the strength left to choose what was right, even when it frightened us. That choice, more than any weapon, more than any fleet, is what truly protected our people in the end." Admiral Whitcomb spoke next, formally confirming the Coalition's commitment to the Threll's continued protection and support. A commitment she noted was not simply a matter of policy, but a reflection of values the Coalition intended to uphold consistently, wherever in the galaxy they might be tested again in the future. Mara, asked to speak as well, found herself struggling briefly to find the right words, standing before the very people who had saved her life months earlier, now free, rebuilding, and secure in ways that had once seemed impossibly distant. She spoke simply, from the heart, about waking up injured and frightened in a crashed ship, surrounded by strangers who owed her nothing, and who chose, again and again, to give everything anyway. "I did not survive because I was strong," Mara said. "I survived because these people were kind, at a moment when kindness cost them everything they had left. I will spend the rest of my career, and honestly, the rest of my life, making sure that kindness is never forgotten, and never goes unanswered again." As the ceremony concluded, and the gathered crowd began the quiet, joyful work of celebration, shared food, shared stories, Threll and human voices mixing together under the light of the rising twin moons, Mara found a quiet moment to step aside, standing once more beside Thassa near the edge of the newly rebuilt village. "What will you do now?" Thassa asked her. "Now that your debt, as you called it, has been repaid." Mara considered the question carefully before answering. "I think," she said slowly, Some debts are not simply repaid once and then forgotten. I think the best ones become something else entirely, a reason to keep showing up, again and again, for as long as it matters. Thassa nodded slowly, a small, knowing smile touching her weathered features. Then perhaps, she said, this is not truly an ending at all. No, Mara agreed, looking out over the rebuilt village, the laughing children, the steady lights of coalition support vessels moving quietly across the night sky above. I don't think it is. They had protected one human, expecting nothing in return. And Earth's armies had repaid that favor in full, not simply with force, but with a promise that would outlast the battle, the rebuilding, and even the generation that had lived through it. That on Threlkar, and everywhere humanity's reach extended among the stars, kindness shown to the smallest and most vulnerable would always, without exception, be remembered, honored, and repaid.